Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world.
So I'm Ben Beavers. I'm the founder of Smarty Plants. It's a bit about my background. Prior to starting Smarty Plants, I was a management consultant for just over a decade, initially working in project management and technology, and then doing lots of sort of data and organizational transformation work, working with C-level execs on sort of organization-wide problems. Way back when, I also studied biology, which has had no relevance professionally up until starting Smarty Plants. Outside of this, personal interest, really interested in ultra endurance events and training for them. And I've found they've been super helpful for training the resilience that you need to be an entrepreneur. There is a lot of commonalities across the two, I think. In terms of Smarty Plants, so the problem that we are solving is that the UK is a nation of houseplant lovers. Nearly half of us buy houseplants each year, but half of them have killed an average of 5 in the last 18 months. So we are also a nation of serial killers. And there is no judgment when I say that, because the reason I got into this is because my other half is now a reformed serial killer, and was upset at how many plants she was killing. And I thought we could definitely do something about that. So we're getting ready to launch to the public in a couple of months, after having a pretty successful pre-launch campaign to date. So I'll pause there and hand back over to you for any and all questions on that.
Yeah, well, I've got a ton of questions. And look, thanks so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. We met at the Southeast Angels Roadshow, I think it was, wasn't it, in Brighton? They were,
Yes.
was it the final or something like that? I can't remember.
Was
it the final?
It was.
Yeah. That's where we met. I saw your pitch and it was awesome. And I thought it was... Well, look, I mean, it resonated with me like it did for so many people for the reason you just mentioned there, which is the fact that we are a nation of plant serial killers. And it is an epidemic. I walk past many plants in both my house and my garden every day and feel a twinge of guilt every time I do. But yeah, you said that was the problem. I guess those listening and watching will probably be curious to know, well, what's the solution? So do you want to kind of expand on that and sort of just explain that for everyone?
Yeah, that would be really helpful to share, wouldn't it? So, yeah. The way we're solving the problem, the way we're helping people is we've got a smart plant sensor. So it sits in your plant pot, it gathers data on everything you need to know for happy, healthy plants. And then we've got an app which analyzes that data and then gives tailored recommendations to each specific plant. So as a plant owner, you get told for your rubber plant, this is what it needs and this is the condition of it now. So we make it effectively impossible to kill your plants. I'm sure when we talk to legal, there's going to be some sort of pushback on a claim like that, but I'm pretty confident about it.
Yeah, I think the using those sort of words might...
Yeah.
Even on YouTube, to be honest, using those words, we have to be careful. But yeah, that's fine. I didn't think about that before. Never mind. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, that's and you've got is that a prototype there you've got, or is that one of the finished articles? What is that you've got? Can we have a look?
Yeah, certainly can. So it's a late stage prototype. So we are getting ready to go into sort of pre-production and manufacturing of these. But it's a fully working, does what it says on the tin, analyzes everything it needs and gives great data out on it. So we've got
awesome.
At the bottom here, we've got our soil sensor. So it analyzes soil moisture and soil nutrients. Clips in. Love the little click. It was magnetic collector.
You've got to have those satisfying user sounds. You've got to have those. They're so important.
Definitely. And then above ground we do humidity, temperature and light as well.
Very cool. I just realized as well, did we synchronize what we're wearing today on purpose? I like people must be thinking that we kind of orchestrated this intentionally.
Do we not say that you sent me the text before? Do we pretend it was
no. And make sure it's green because of Smarty Plants.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And how long has it taken to get to this point? Like because of IoT, anything sort of real world hardware, physical products. We've had people on the show before, and the journey to get from concepts to a prototype it can be mind-numbingly complex. And what's that journey been like for you guys?
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. So relatively quite quick, I think, but it's felt quite slow to me. Sort of as we've been going through it. So we had our first prototypes It's a funny story behind it. I sort of had the idea and was like, well, my other half was like, oh, fed up with killing all these plants. I was like, I'm sure we can build a sensor that does this. So I ordered a load of sort of different things off Amazon and went, oh, I'll be able to code that up. I'll be able to learn. No background in it, but sort of muddled it all together, learned how to solder, got it there. It was working. I was like, this is brilliant. I'm going to put a battery on it, blew up the battery, now have a hole in my desk. Went at that point, this is probably enough electronics for me, and started working with an electronics engineer. But it took us a couple of months to get those first prototypes, and then a lot of focus on the Kickstarter, on the pre-launch campaign. But it's been a year and 3 or 4 months to date to get to this point. And it will probably be another sort of 3 months with just reconfirming the timelines with the manufacturers as they come back from Chinese New Year, but probably another 3 months before we'll fulfill. So I suspect about 18 months from idea to shipping the product, with a pre-launch campaign in the middle.
I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that's not too bad. But like you said, I'm sure for yourself, it must feel incredibly like an incredibly long period of time. But I suppose it really depends on the product. We've had so many interesting people on the show and a variety of different products. And I think when it really, so we've had someone on before that's done a consumer product, but for the kitchen, right? And so when it becomes food product, I mean, that's different, right? People are going to be consuming it, and there's all these different kinds of regulations. What are there any sort of regulations that have surprised you that you've had to encounter for this product that you're like, oh, I didn't realize we'd have to, get that certificate or be compliant for this? I mean, it's a houseplant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So luckily, I sort of had my eyes open. I was walking into it, but there's a couple of things in the product that are that are definitely more challenging than I would have thought before I started. Shipping it with a lithium-ion battery is that takes quite a lot. There's a lot of sort of certification and regulations that need to go into to shipping a product with that. We originally didn't have a rechargeable battery in it, but it was sort of customer conversations on the way they use it and what their expectations that sort of led us towards that. And thankfully, I heard at that point how much extra work it was to get those batteries in there. So we were able to make that decision consciously. But it is it's a surprisingly complex thing, and I know that some of my competitors have not been able to ship internationally because they haven't managed to resolve those issues, get those certifications to ship it overseas, which sort of shows the complexity of the challenge. I think if you try and solve it retrospectively rather than know that it's something you need to solve up front.
Yeah, and I suppose, did you kind of look at that as an opportunity to get a bit of a competitive edge, essentially?
Massively. So So there are two things that our sensor does that are quite different, and deliberately quite different from competitors. We have Wi-Fi on board, and Wi-Fi on board is because we want to have constant connectivity. And if you don't have Wi-Fi on board, you've got to have Bluetooth and a hub, which is extra complexity from having two different products. But it's a rubbish user experience as well, because you've got to have hubs in every room that you've got sensors, and that's going to get quite expensive. So we decided we were going to have Wi-Fi, but the trade-off with putting Wi-Fi on is that it's pretty power hungry. So because we were then using Wi-Fi, we then needed a bigger battery to be able to not have to get people to keep replacing the battery and chucking it away. We went lithium ion, which meant we were able to give a really good battery life. We're able to give Wi-Fi, and it's rechargeable, which is a win, rather than using a coin cell, which lasts a similar amount of time, but the customer then needs to open it up and change it, rather than just stick it in a USB-C charger and let it charge back up.
Oh, and you've gone USB-C as well. That's good.
Yes.
Yeah. That's great. But look, let's excuse me. Let's take a bit of a step back, actually, before we get too far into it. Because this all, I mean, look, I've got a ton of questions about the product and about the Kickstarter and all kinds of stuff. But let's take a step back a little bit. So, in the lead up to this, you mentioned that you kind of, the idea came about with a conversation with your partner, right? Sorry, did you say wife or just girlfriend? Sorry.
We're getting married later this year, so
all right. So fiance
at this point.
Congratulations, that's awesome.
Thank you.
So in conversation that kind of sparked this idea. But prior to all of this, had you ever thought about starting your own business or becoming a founder? Had you dabbled in any kind of entrepreneurial endeavors, or Tell me a bit about that, or tell us a bit about
I think I've always loved the idea of starting a business.
that. Mm.
I did try and launch a business many years ago, and learned a lot of very hard lessons very quickly about what not to do and about what's important for me if I'm going to go on this journey, if I'm going to sort of make the level of commitment that it takes to found a company. So it was a gym wear business, and it was retailing other people's products. No real competitive differentiator. Sort of assumed you'd be able to get enough traffic through ads to be able to make it profitable. And you've really got to be able to stand out. You've really got to know who your customer is, how you're speaking to them, and if you're just selling other people's products, I think it's a much harder sell. And in an industry like that, I think it's very hard to make it work without a big budget, without all of the without a different edge. That kind of petered out after a while, and I realized that, if you're going to do this, it's got to be something that you're really passionate about. You've got to figure out how you're different. Like, what is your defensibility? How are you going to be able to really stand out and sort of hold your ground in the market? So they were kind of things that I took and sort of brought into Smarty Plants. I had I guess a bit of an epiphany in the lead up where I wasn't really enjoying my job, and it's strange to say that because it was some of the most interesting work I've ever done professionally, and I enjoyed consulting for a very long time. I think it was a great career for me, but I was just falling out of love with it, and I heard it was Sam Altman when they've got, so Y Combinator's got some really interesting Y Combinator vaults where you get speeches from people sort of 10 years ago, and this was when Sam Altman was heading Y Combinator, and he was asked the question by his brother, what is it that you think most founders get wrong? And he answered it by talking about risk. He said that people generally have a really bad handle on risk, so people will misunderstand the risk, or the risk associated with catastrophic risk, and not really comprehend the risk with chronic risk. So to bring it to life, catastrophic risk could be I'm not going to go out and ride my bike because I might get hit by a car and then I'll die, and that's terrible. Obviously, that's terrible. And then you've got chronic risk, so you never go out and ride your bike. So what's the risk associated with that? Well, you get older, you might have health issues, you might end up with all of these other sort of complications, and then you get lower quality of life as you get older. So that really resonated to go, well, actually, if you're going to look at a risk, look at it from both ends.
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
And so I looked at the risk. I sort of had this idea, and I looked at the risk and said, well, what are the risks associated with this? And the catastrophic risks are obviously terrifying. I might lose my house. I might, my other half might leave me. Like, I'll run out of all of this. And then from the other end, I sort of went, but what's the chronic risk? And I sort of imagined, if I'm 80, then I'm on my deathbed and I'm looking back, how am I going to feel if I never took that risk? And if I take the risk now and it goes wrong, what's the consequences? It's going to be a few years of probably quite a miserable few years, but you'll get back on your feet. Like, you're young enough to get through it and to get out the other side of it. And the thought of being 80 and looking back on my life and going, you never tried, you were never brave enough to give it a go. It just terrified me. So I thought, so you know what? I've got a good idea. I've got some really compelling evidence to say that there's a market for this, and we're seeing some great traction. So went, yeah, do you know what? Let's do it. So ended up jumping in both feet at that point.
Yeah, the thing about risk is it can be really sort of confusing for people for like the reason you said, like the example that Sam Altman gave, like about riding a bike. But it is tough because if especially when you have the responsibilities of adulthood, and if you have a partner and kids and things, especially, which a lot of people I speak to, they're kind of in that position when coming up with or deciding to take the plunge, mortgages and other financial responsibilities. It becomes a really scary prospect to do it, and it's surprising that that people do. I'm one of them. You know, you kind of think, well, you idiot. Like, what are you doing? If you're going to have done it at any time in your life, then, you know, do it when you don't have those responsibilities. But it's interesting because it's also, it's risk, but then there's also the potential reward. And that's the important bit, not to mention the sort of, like you said about job satisfaction. You know, there's the other element of it there, which is the sort of idea of purpose, you know, and feeling more fulfilled, which, you know, in of itself kind of, I think, can be a trade-off which feels a lot more worth it. It's like, well, okay, even if I fail, at least I've achieved something. Maybe I've grown, I've learned, and at the end of the day, during that period, I'm going to feel potentially more fulfilled than I am right now. So it is about those sort of trade-offs, even if they're temporary as well, isn't it? Like, to a degree.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one because there's not a right answer. It's going to be the
Right.
right answer for each person. But I think when you think about fulfillment, yeah, and does it affect how you show up at home as well? Because there are risks obviously associated with, like, it's a much bigger, much scarier risk if you've got kids. On the counter side of that, are you showing up the way that you want, or are you not showing up the way that you would like to be? Are you role modeling for your kids? I think as well, as you get older, the risks feel bigger, but the odds are different. And the odds, as we see with the average age of successful founders is I think 45 plus. So you go, actually the odds shift as well. So yeah, it feels like there's more at stake, but it's a better set of odds to be able to gamble. I still think the odds are against you, like whatever you do, right? But I think that's one of the beautiful things about founders is you know the odds are against you, but you think you're the one that's going to succeed.
Yeah, I mean,
you've got
there's that certain level of arrogance that comes in.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I mean, it's the confidence thing. I think, you know, as we get older, there is a level of confidence, and maybe, you know, work experience, I think, puts us there too, because of like your work previously as a consultant. You know, presumably you would have been exposed to a lot of very unique situations, working with some really interesting and great companies and executives and all that kind of stuff. Like, so there's skills that you pick up along the way that helps build a level of confidence that I think when it comes to looking at that challenge, that makes you kind of, and this was certainly the case for me, you know, throughout my career, where I worked with so many founders at that point and tackled so many sort of commercial puzzles and problems and so on, that, you know, once it got to doing it and I'm staring down the barrel of like, there's a problem here that needs to be fixed. My instinct then isn't to go, I'm sure someone will fix it. It's to go, I could do this. Like, I know I can do this. I have the skills to do it, you know, or at least I have the most of them. And if I don't, you know, I can go and get the rest of them. I think there's a certain level of confidence that comes with age and experience too, that kind of, you know, it doesn't like make you blind to the risks. If anything, it makes the risks a lot more clearer, and you can kind of put them to the side and go, okay, so these are the ones that we need to tackle. But you just suddenly have the confidence to go for it then, you know. And I think confidence is incredibly important when going, especially for something like what you're doing, which is to create something entirely new, you know, and completely different and from the ground up. You've got to have that confidence, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's also some, for me personally, at least, you go from going, I can solve every problem, to I know that I can get those problems solved, which is probably a subtle shift, but it's rather than trying to solve everything yourself, you go, well, actually, I can create a sort of system and a team that's very effective at solving this particular problem. And then so the scale of the challenges perhaps aren't quite as scary, because you go, well, I don't need to do every part of this, but I do need to make sure every part of this is done. Yeah.
And like you said, really importantly there, find the right people to help me along the way. And I think that's something that I definitely have found that younger founders don't necessarily think about. They quite often look at it as, and this isn't always the case, I'm generalizing, but more often than not, you speak to them about, okay, well, how are you going to tackle this problem? How are you going to tackle this problem? And they've got the answer. Whereas you speak to an older founder and they're like, well, we'll deal with that when the time comes. It's on our radar and we know it's going to come, but we're going to hire for that. Like, because that isn't in my wheelhouse. We're going to hire for that. That's usually the answer. You're like, okay, that's good. Like, you know, it's like, you know, I'm not going to, you know, instead of like you speak to a 20-year-old just out of uni and it's like, oh, I'll stay up all night and I'll learn about it. And it's like, no, don't do that. What are you doing? You're the CEO.
It's a crazy, like, I think there's advantages and disadvantages, right? Because there's times where you do just need to go, I'm going to stay up all night and I'm going to learn about this. And like with the
Well, it
electronics,
depends what it is.
was that the right move?
Are you going to stay up all night and learn how to be a solicitor to manage some new legal chat? No, hire a fucking legal expert to do that. It depends on what it is. But yeah, there's a balance, because if that would still be also impressive for certain things, wouldn't it? Yeah. But not for like long-term challenges. You'd be like, well, don't do that. Like learn, if you're going to learn anything now, learn how to sell. Like learn how to sell the products and make money. Go to market. But yeah. But it's challenging, because there's just so many skill sets that you need to pick up along the way. But yeah, do you feel like that your prior experience as a consultant kind of, or, like you said, you weren't necessarily kind of like feeling, too satisfied at the time with it, but do you feel like that there was quite a lot of things you picked up there that built your level of confidence to be able to do this?
Massively. I think I do think consulting is a great place to go to if you want to sort of prepare yourself for this, because what you learn is you learn how to handle really complex, intimidating situations, and you learn how to navigate them and to deliver value and to communicate effectively as you go through it. You learn how to build a team around solving a specific problem. To your point of confidence, you start to build confidence that you can handle these things. And one of the things that I noticed over the course of my career was, when I started, I'd go into whatever the engagement, the piece of work was, and I'd be scared. I'd be like, oh, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. It feels like a lot. But then as time goes on, you start to realize that you feel like that every time, and that feeling never goes away. You're always going to go in. There's always going to be something in that particular project that you go, oh, that's going to be, I don't know how we're going to be able to solve that. Then you've got a bank of history to look back on and say, well, you've done it every other time. So this time is unlikely to be the one time that it doesn't work. Having that confidence, I think, then it's confidence you can rely on yourself, that you can trust yourself to navigate those kind of challenges. But that has been super helpful coming into entrepreneurship, because it's that times 100, right? You come in and everything's up in the air, and you've got to figure out how you're navigating through all of these different things to deliver on the vision, to deliver whatever value it is that you're committing to deliver. Figure out, is that actually the right thing to do, and change tack if you need to as you go in there. But knowing that you can navigate complex, changing situations, I think, is a really valuable thing to take, and consultancy for me really helped me to develop that.
Yeah, makes sense. So thanks for kind of bringing me back, for the context there. So then talk to me about the decision to decide to do a crowdfunding campaign. Is that still ongoing? Is that right?
Still up on Lake Pledges, so we're not driving traffic towards it, but people can still pre-order and back on Kickstarter.
Yeah, so I know very little about crowdfunding other than the sort of basics, right? I know that it's very difficult, right? That you need to have, or at least in theory, it's very difficult. It's similar to like what you're mentioning about that sort of your first foray into entrepreneurialism with the the e-commerce sort of concept. You really need to put yourself out there. You need to create a brand. There's a lot of marketing really involved in launching a Kickstarter, at least from my understanding of it, which can be quite challenging from what I hear. So I know the sort of fundamentals in that sense, but like, what was the decision? What sort of pushed you along that route to decide to go that route versus, say, equity funding, or something more sort of traditional startup route, I guess. And B, what's kind of been the most surprising aspect of doing that from a sort of just a practical point of view in putting that campaign together and bring it out there.
Mm-hmm. So I guess to answer the why, so I don't define us as a hardware business. I think we're a data business, but hardware is a component of the business. And
that's interesting. Well, can you expand on that? What do you mean by that before you answer my original question?
We're going down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah, this is how we do it, man. What do you mean by that? RevOps leaders, let's be real. You can't optimize what you can't measure. You've got the dashboards, the pipeline data, the forecasts, but what about your sales team's actual skills? That's where Peer, today's sponsor and my startup shamelessly, comes in. Peer runs remote, expert-led sales skills audits. Think of it like a MOT for your revenue team. Instead of guessing who needs coaching or relying on lagging performance data, Peer proactively identifies strengths, skill gaps, and hidden risks before they impact revenue. The best RevOps teams run these audits regularly, creating a structured AI-ready data set that powers smarter hiring, sharper enablement, and faster revenue growth. The best part? You can get started with a free discovery audit plus 20% off your first full audit today. Just click the link in the show notes or use the QR code on screen, and you can start making data-driven sales decisions today. Now, back to the episode.
I've got a view of the so I've got a fundamental view that sits behind what we're building and what we're moving towards. And I sound less crazy every time I say it because things are moving on, which is great. But I've been saying it for a few years, and people used to give me a look. So AI is changing the world. It's an industrial revolution. From my perspective, it's a fundamental shift in how the world works. It changes the way that we engage with technology when we look at multimodal. That is a fundamental shift away from screens and keyboards. Its capacity to do things is far beyond what current compute and sort of algorithms are able to do. And when we look at sort of agentic workflows, it is able to take on a life of its own almost that is so far beyond what we could have imagined, I think, 5 years ago. So I believe there's an industrial revolution going on with that. What typically happens in the industrial revolution is you get the lead up where there's a sort of Cambrian explosion. There's loads of new companies that come on and try and sort of take hold of these new opportunities. You've got this sort of competitive part in the middle where a few of those companies then fight out and the winners emerge, and you get sort of the giants of the new era. So age of software, you'd be looking at Meta, you'd be looking at Google, Amazon. They were the big companies that came out of it. And then you've got a sort of stable period afterwards where sort of everything settles down. Because I believe we're going through that, and because I believe we're in the sort of Cambrian explosion and possibly the middle bit, I'm looking and saying, well, what do I think the world is going to be like after this? So what do I think is going to be really important in that world? What do I think is going to be unchanging? And if I'm building a business, what do I think is well positioned to thrive in that world? And for me, when I look into that future, one of the things that I've got a really high degree of confidence on is the value of data. So data is super important now. If you've got super intelligence in the future and all different companies have access to this, then one of the big competitive advantages for any given organization is going to be access to high quality proprietary data. So the reason that I don't define us as a hardware company and I say that the data is the value in what we're doing is because we are building a brilliant we're building a brilliant business with Smarty Plants. But Smarty Plants is a strong positioning to that world. We're building the capability to manufacture sensors, to build a platform to be able to sort of host and make that data available to whatever APIs it needs to be available to in the future. So I think it's an important differentiation for us as a business, because as we grow, as we build the team, we need to have that perspective of the data is the value in what we're building. Now, that doesn't mean the hardware is not important. The hardware has to give us really good quality data. It has to allow us to have like that quality in the back end. So we have to build a great hardware product. We have to build a brilliant user interface to be able to engage customers and to be able to get them sort of excited and to get value from it. But ultimately, for me, the value in what we're building is the data sort of in the back end, which is probably one of the more concise ways I've explained that world of
I
world I see.
Completely get what you're saying, and it's interesting. I think you've gone through a very similar journey that I have with my startup Peer, which is there was a realization along the way when we were building originally just a fairly straightforward SaaS product. There was a bit of a light bulb moment for me where similar to this, where I was like, wait a minute, no. Like things, I was having conversations after conversations, and people were asking about the data, so what's happening with the data, and I had exactly the same light bulb moment, and also the same struggle to kind of articulate it in the beginning. where I was like, wait a minute, there's this thing. And then I had to just keep speaking to people and asking them and be like, am I on the right track? Because I'm not an AI data expert. Like, have I figured this, am I onto something here? And then people would say, yes, you have. And like, use these words, don't use those. You haven't quite explained it right here. And then eventually I was like, now if someone asks me, I can explain it, fairly well. And I totally agree with you. I think this is something that a lot of startups should be thinking about now, and especially a lot of early stage founders, if they've got ideas to sort of put this into their way of thinking. Kind of going back to what we were saying earlier about thinking about future problems or future opportunities and having them on the radar, and maybe doing some small things at the beginning to gear up for it, or maybe in some cases more immediate. But it's a big opportunity. It is a huge opportunity. I don't think as well, not just because I think if you're listening to this from the outside and you don't really understand what we're talking about, it might sound a bit like the whole big data thing, the problems we've had over the years with big companies, taking personal data and doing nefarious things with it. But actually the opportunity here isn't just for the companies to potentially grow and have additional revenue streams and things like that, but actually for the customers themselves to create an incredible experience, far more seamless experience, multi-modal, sort of cross-platform, more tailored, more customized, more bespoke. Actually, that's the way I think a lot of us are thinking about this, is kind of from a user experience perspective. Like, wow, the things we're going to be able to do for people is going to be great. Like, I don't know, at least that's the way I see it,
I completely agree, and there is a trend towards it. You've seen with smartwatches, with people are using personalized health data to be able to live better quality lives, to be able to enhance their everyday lives, to be able to learn things about themselves that they wouldn't otherwise have known. And I think there is, with the ability to process that data in a very sort of localized area, I think it's a really exciting opportunity. And that's, so for us building these sensors, we're going to give you some really cool insights into sort of your home and what you can do to get your houseplants to thrive. And maybe you go, well, my kitchen's kind of, it's positioned like this in the house, so it get this much sun during the day, and it's maybe the windows are a little bit breezy, or they're sort of super triple glazed and there's no airflow in there. You maybe be able to go, well, these kind of plants are actually going to thrive in this room, and other type of plants will thrive in this rooms. You can almost build your own jungle with your own different sort of almost different like areas of the world's climates, like microclimates in different parts of your home. It's really exciting, the possibility of what we can build and what we can give to people. And we've got to see whether people want it as we go through. Obviously, we've got these ideas are great, but do people actually care? But
the point is,
question.
if you've thought about it, then and you've got the some level of infrastructure early on, just at least to capture it, then you have the options later. Then you can explore that. That's the point. It's like, but you've got to have thought about it in the first place, and that's the key. We've similar sort of hypothesis, like I say, within Peer. It's like, wow, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And then suddenly, your mind starts racing. I remember when I first explained it to my co-founder and the senior team, like everyone's mind started racing. It's like, wow. And everyone was, excited. We could do this. We did that. Yeah, maybe. But like for now, we don't need to really do anything. For now, we just know that, in the future, there's these opportunities. Let's just be mindful of that. And as we collect this data, let's collect it in a certain way. Let's store it in a certain way so that it's there. And then also, like, let's get some legal advice to make sure we're not screwing anyone over, and all that sort of, just put the guardrails in place, and then we'll see what the future holds, because no one can predict. Because this is the interesting thing as well, in the advent of AI, it's like it's not as cut and dry as some other sort of technologies where we can go, okay, well in a year's time it's pretty much going to look like that. It's accelerating at such a rate that no one's going to be able to make any really accurate predictions of when and where and how things are going to unfold. So it's like, we're not going to tell investors and, stuff like that. Like, in 2 years' time, we're definitely going to do this. And 3 years' time, we're definitely going to do that. It's like, look, we're just going to collect it and see what happens, man. Because it's going to be interesting and it's going to be useful in some way, Like like just a weird thing, but this is where my brain raised on sci-fi and reading sci-fi novels and movies goes. When you were talking about that, was like, personal robots, right? Just thinking of a robot walking around the house doing the house cleaning, and if it's connected to every single plant in your house, it just knows like which ones to water, which ones to prune. You know what I mean? That's where my brain's going. I'm thinking like the Jetsons. Do you know what I mean? Like this, it's just a robot that's like, oh, the plant upstairs is dying. I better go and look after that. You know?
Do you know, it's really funny you mentioned that, because I've sort of half jokingly said to people, and people are like, oh, but what might it be in that world? I've said, well, honestly, we might just end up being like an accessory company for Tesla robots, something like that. In the same way, you buy phone cases, like maybe you buy our plant sensors just as a plug-on finger for your Tesla robot, and it just goes around and checks all of them.
But it's crazy that we can say that now, and it's not actually that crazy. If you'd said that a couple of years ago, someone would have looked at you like, "Come on, man!" But like now, you know, we look at robots as, you know, a very viable potential, you know, sort of accessory almost for people to have. Like Elon's pretty bullish on the fact that he thinks, you know, a personal robot is going to be just as popular as a smartphone in the future, and I'm inclined to believe him, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting with this stuff, because you want to leave your options open for it, but you don't necessarily want to bet on it until you see the traction. With all of this stuff, this is one of the challenges of being a founder, right? You've got all of these incredible ideas, but to be able to do any of them, you need to survive to get there, and it's having those conversations with yourself to go, yeah, that's all great, that's interesting. What's the crocodile closest to the boat, and how do you stop that from eating you? Because you need to get there before you can achieve any of it. So
you're absolutely right. Yeah, you can get very carried away with your own ideas, and yeah, it can take you down some pretty unconstructive places if you dwell on them for too long, or sort of, you know, go down those rabbit holes for too long. But I also think that's an incredibly good sign. Like that's a sign of a very creative thinker, but also problem solver. When I encounter founders that are thinking of like all kinds of the crazy things that their idea can spin off into and do, and stuff like that's awesome. But then, you know, coupled with like you said, that really grounded kind of approach of that's all fine and well, but for right now we've got like this go-to-market problem or this technical problem, and so we're focused on that. You know, that's a perfect combination in my mind of a founder that's willing to dream big, but also is grounded enough to know what's the sort of focus right here and right now. But anyway, well, thanks for indulging me on that sort of slight tangent. But okay, back to the original question then. So Kickstarter. so I can't remember what my original question was exactly, but hopefully you can. So yeah.
So why do we do it? So having got over I don't consider us a hardware business, but there's a hardware element, and answer that question. I think for anybody who's building a hardware product, it would be silly not to look at Kickstarter or Indiegogo. And I think important to differentiate as well. You've got equity crowdfunding and product crowdfunding. Equity crowdfunding, when you go into the crowd to raise for investment in your business, and you sell equity for it. And then product, where you are doing pre-order sales and people are buying the product in advance, and you're getting the capital, but you're not giving away any of the business. Because I've found that that's not everybody's aware of the differentiation between the two. But if you have a physical product, to not go to a platform like Kickstarter and use it firstly to see, is there a market for your product? Will people buy your product, and will people buy your product from you? That, I think, is a missed opportunity, because it costs a lot to develop a hardware product, and you want to be confident that people are actually going to buy it, and that you can sell it. I think before you invest in that, it also gives you the upfront capital to be able to invest in the product development, and you've got all sorts of really big costs that come with starting a physical product, buying molds. So this is a really small sensor. But you're looking tens of thousands of pounds for the injection molding sort of casings. So to get those tools, that's a significant upfront commitment. And if you can do the pre-order sales, you can use that money to pay for those tools. But you're also confident that you're not just wasting all of that money on tools, only to find out that actually nobody was going to buy your product anyway, or actually your branding was off and people weren't going to buy it from you. So that, for me, was the reason that we decided to do it, because it gave us a great opportunity to do it.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
Probably the biggest surprise for me was something that I was aware of, but I didn't really appreciate how valuable it was the other advantage you get is you've then got an engaged community of people who are interested in your product, who have paid for your product, and these people are invested in making your product a success. So I knew that would be great. But the thing that really caught me off guard was just how useful it was. We got some really fun feedback. I see if I've got one. Yeah, I've got one here. So this was the original sensor design. So this is the one that you see on the Kickstarter campaign. We got feedback that it was boring, and that it looked rubbish. And I'm not a product designer, so I didn't take it too personally. But it was really good to hear that before we'd invested in molds, that people were looking and go, yeah, but there's no personality in it. It's not very interesting. But because we have this community, we were then able to work with an industrial designer to go and come up with a load of concepts and then take it to the backers. And we got them to vote. We got them to say, look, here are a load of concepts. What ones do you like? Give us feedback. Tell us what you like about them, what you don't like about them, rank them. And we did a number of iterations of that. And that was how we got to this design. So I'm confident that this is a good design, because I've had 600 people tell me this is the design that wins for them. And it's quite an interesting one, because you kind of, with this as well, you're not trying to get the most popular design, because you don't want something divisive. This is going to be in people's homes. People are going to be looking at it. So you want to find the least unpopular and also most popular. You kind of want to go, you want people in the middle not really caring and then leaning towards loves it, rather than a large portion of people loving it and a large chunk of people going hate it. And so that's where we got to this. We did all sorts of models to try and go, if we weight it in this way versus this way, how did it come out? And that one came out on top across the board. So that was great and gave us the confidence to then move forwards with it.
That's really cool. So essentially that community acts as, well, I mean, it acts as a lot of things, doesn't it? I mean, like you said, it's that early traction. It shows from the beginning, okay, people actually want this. So that must massively boost your confidence in everything that you're doing. The funds to be able to get it going, at least in the early stages, and then essentially market research and focus groups that you would ordinarily have to pay an enormous amount of money for, but these people are volunteering to do. Plus, they're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're actually saying, "We love the concept so much, we're actually willing to pay in advance for it." And give you our free input and free advice. That's worth its weight in gold. All of that. That's fantastic. I mean, those are the trade-offs, right? Those are from the hard work that you're putting into launching a campaign like that. But how did you go about doing it in the first place? Did you engage with like a consultant who specializes in it, and a company or something? Because I know there's a whole sort of industry around that itself, just launching an effective campaign, breaking through the noise, because it is a really noisy marketplace in of itself. So how did you go about it? Or did you just, go for it yourself and just really work hard at it?
So I work with an agency, and there's different types of agencies. You've got ones that will do it all for you, and you've got ones that will work with you to do it. And the agency I went with, Launchboom, brilliant, strongly recommend them. But they help you to do it. So they won't just go off in a black box and do it all. And then if the campaign's a success, great, but you don't know what worked. If the campaign tanks, you don't know whether it could have been done better. But they work with you. They've got a process that takes you from validation of your idea through to sort of launching and running the campaign, and then support with closing it out and all the things that come afterwards as well. And so they walk you through their structure, and the structure that they have is, I guess, working backwards. So you want a successful Kickstarter campaign. To do that, you've got to get lots of traffic. You've got to get lots of people backing it. To get lots of people backing it, you've got to have lots of people visiting the page. And in Kickstarter, the way you do that is you're at the top of the algorithm. You're at the top of the rankings. So people come, click on your page and then convert. to stay at the top of the algorithm, you've got to do a few things. You've got to demonstrate that you're an attractive product and project. Kickstarter does that in a couple of ways. So Kickstarter will give you a projects we love badge, which says this is innovative, this is different, this is cool. And they will also look at how quickly you were funded. So you need to be funded in the first 24 hours. Otherwise, you will take a hit on the your ranking in the algorithm beyond
it's kind
that
of like
point.
their SEO, basically. Their built-in SEO.
Yeah, that's their sign of this is an interesting project. So how do you get funded in the first 24 hours? You've got to have people ready to buy your product. So when you press go, people are there going, yeah, I want this, I'm interested, I'm going to buy it. If you try and launch it organically and just let it happen, it's not, you're going to get lost in the weeds of all the other projects. So you need to be confident when you press go on your project that you are going to be funded, and you are going to be funded very quickly. We had a 5K initial funding goal, and we hit that in 17 minutes. We were at 35K by the end of the first day.
Wow.
So that's the value of doing that pre-launch campaign is you get that. To do that, you need to build out a mailing list, and you need to test the quality of that mailing list. So you run a load of sort of meta ads to get people to sign up and learn about your project and give you their email address. And then you do a little purchase test. So you ask, would you be interested in this extra benefit or early access to the campaign by putting down a $1 deposit? So next to nothing in terms of the commitment, but it tests buyer intent. And because it tests buyer intent, because people are putting their hands into their pocket to give you that deposit, you've got much more confidence on the conversion rate of those. So you can predict the conversion rate of your reservation deposits. The conversion rate of your mailing list is really hard to predict. It can be anywhere from 1% to 10%. And if you know you need to hit these numbers on day one, that kind of variation just doesn't work for you. But you're going to get about a 30% conversion rate on your reservation deposits. So you just keep building up this mailing list and this collection of backers to go and launch. And there's so much other value you can get from that. So we, with the backers, with the people who would put in the deposits, we had a Facebook group, and about a quarter of the people who put the deposits joined the Facebook group. But that meant that we could speak to them. So we were able to have conversations with people and test messaging, and we were deciding on product colors and saying, well, these are the options we're considering. And we went in and we did a vote and said, look, what do you want? And there were clear winners in that. They helped inform our sort of product strategy from that point. But it also gave you visibility into what kind of people they are. And that helped with the advertising. So because we could see the people who had backed, we could see their likes, we could see their interests, we could see what sort of things they were doing. We were then able to build audiences that specifically catered to those interests. So a couple of the really interesting things that came out of it were a load of the people sort of had Disney in their profile pictures. A load of the guys, some form of Disney. And so we tested and we did a targeted ad campaign, nothing to do with plants, but targeted on Disney as the common interest. And that was one of the top performing audiences for the campaign.
How interesting.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
And it's the value of getting to know your customers, because it means that our customer acquisition cost over time dropped hugely, because we really got to understand these are the kind of people who are really interested and really engaged in this product. Everything we've learned there comes with an asterisk as we go live, direct to consumer, because that needs to be tested. Buying through Kickstarter is a very different purchasing journey than buying through a website when it can be delivered immediately. But we've got this really good understanding of our customers to date, and we need to rebuild that as we go direct to consumer. But I think that's the value of being able to do Kickstarter and taking a structured approach, is that you really get to learn and understand who is it that are engaging with your product, what do they care about with your product, and then you can make changes to the product or to the strategy when you still have the time to do it before you've shipped it and you go, it's out there now. There's nothing we can do to implement these learnings.
That's super interesting, man. Like it's and that's kind of reassuring in a weird way, because I'm quite well known with the founders I speak with as an advisor, and just generally on this show and stuff like that, of being pretty much against the concept of marketing before sales. I always say sales before marketing. And so the thing about Kickstarters or crowdfunding in general that's always had me a little bit confused and uncertain, because like I said, I learned a lot of what you just told me there, is that it often felt like putting marketing before sales, like putting the cart before the horse, and that always felt a bit iffy to me. But the way you're explaining it to me is kind of reassuring, and it's like, actually, no, in order to build that alpha audience, you had to sell to you, basically, in a sense. You're saying we need to see a commitment. And this is why I've always said sales before marketing, because it's like, marketing doesn't ask for any commitment, really, and it can be very expensive, to not really get you anywhere. So it's kind of reassuring what you've explained there, in that sense, that no, you've gone out and actually your focus is to sell. It's to make some sort of conversion, to understand buyer intent, to build that initial alpha community that can then, which I suppose then is what you use to convert them to the beta community, which is then on the Kickstarter. And you kind of in stages, but really interestingly is the way you're using data there, in quite a surprising way, with very surprising results, which I've got a ton of questions about, but we're going to have to wait until part 2 to do that. So, because we've reached the end of part 1. So, listen, for those listening and watching, first of all, I would advise that if you are listening, to jump back go on YouTube or Spotify, where you can look and just see the beginning, where Ben showed the 2 prototypes, that the early one that backers said looked ugly, and then the newer one, just so you've got a sense of what it looks like, or go to the website and have a look. But yeah, those 2 there you go. It's put them in on screen there. So, and also, if you're listening or watching, come back in a couple of days for part 2. So subscribe, notifications, all of that nonsense, and then you get notified when part 2 comes out in a couple of days' time. So thank you, Ben, and we'll see you in part 2, guys.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you for listening and or watching. Subscribe with notifications turned on to get notified when part 2 comes out. While you wait, please join in the conversation in the comments below.